Hi, welcome to Pammie Craft Hut. Today, we will be making a macrame tote bag with foldable sides. The dimension of the bag is about 21 cm across, 37 cm in height, and 11 cm in the depth. The bag can be worn with sides either folded in or folded out. To make the bag, I'll be using 4 mm thickness macrame cord, one piece of 310 cm and 55 pieces of 250 cm yarn. We start by taking the 310 cm yarn, find its middle point and have it secured onto a rod. Thereafter, we will use blockheads knot and have only 54 pieces of the 250 cm yarn attached to the longer piece on the rod. Take note to leave out one piece of 250 cm yarn. We will fix it on later. Once all the 54 pieces of yarn are tied up, we will make our first row of square knots across. Next, with 6 pieces of stitch marker pins, let's identify the bag's side foldings. From left to right, we place stitch marker after the 5th square knot. Thereafter, skip 2 knots for the second marker and skip another 2 knots for the third marker. Skip 10 square knots and make the 4th marking. And again, skip 2 knots for the 5th marking and skip another 2 for the last and the 6th marking. You should have a total of 4 square knots left at the end at the right side. After marking, we will continue with square knots in the second row. Do remember to leave out the first 2 yarn before starting on the square knots. Please note, whenever there is a folding indicator, do not tie a square knot across. We will skip this square knot and continue with the next set of square knots. Now I will readjust the hanging of the bag. We are going to join up the full round of the bag. Do have the bag flipped around. Hang the bag in a way such that you can bring the two ends towards the center. We are going to crisscross the two end strings, and using the last 250 cm yarn, we are going to tie a lug hitch knot at the crisscross. Have the strings lightly adjusted. Do not over-tighten the knots on both sides of the crisscross. Continue to do a square knot at the crisscross. Thereafter, we will complete the remaining second row knots. Moving on to the third row. This row, you will be able to fit a square knot to the left and to the right side of a folding indicator. For this, do have the square knots linked by crisscrossing them. We will do a total of 21 rows. Do alternate the second and third rows method till you reach row 21. Count to ensure that you have 21 rows of square knots. I have placed my stitch marker pins at row 20. We will lightly tie up the yarns from the four corners of the bag. From where the fold identification stitch marker pins from above, take 2 yarns from the left and 2 yarns from the right. Tie up lightly. Repeat the same process for the other 3 corners. We shall now hang the bag in a way such that the side is facing us. We will be starting to close up the bottom. Do 3 rows of square knots. For the first and second row, please do observe the alternating pattern for the folding of the bag. 2 knots for the first and second row and 1 knot for the third row. It will have a V shape. For the last row, which is the third row, the square knot will be tied across the folding. Do the same process for the other side. Next, position the long side of the bag facing us. Continue to make 3 rows of square knot on both the front and the back. At the beginning of each row, do leave out 2 yarns at the beginning. You should also achieve a V shape for these 3 rows. From side and front, the level of completed knots will have the same length. Do the same process for the other side. Time for the base. I shall now continue to work on a table. Flip the bag inside out as we're tying the bottom and having the knots inside the bag. Start to work from the side. Untie the lightly tied corner knots. We will make 7 square knots at each of the 4 corners. After tying each of the square knots, leave out the 2 side yarns, keeping only the 2 center filler yarns to continue with the next knot. At each of the corner, there should be 7 square knots. Continue to work with the other 3 sides. Lightly tie up the side yarns from the completed square knots so they don't get in your way. Do leave the filler's yarn untied. Now, To finish up the final opening at the bottom, I have placed 2 boxes of surgical masks inside the bag to help hold up the shape so that I can tie easier. From the 4 filler yarns, leave out the 2 side yarns and keep the middle 2. Arrange the 2 sides of yarns in order so we will have square knots tied all the way down. You will not be able to tie all the yarns as it may result in the base having an unnatural bulge. So you may need to skip a few wherever it is overcrowding. But do ensure that both sides have the same amount of skipped yarns. Once you have done all the tying, and when the filler yarns from one end meets the other, we will use the 4 filler yarns to tie 2 square knots. We are now done with the base. Leave a short length for every yarn, and you may trim away the rest of the length. Thereafter, flip the bag over so to have the correct side facing outwards. Now we are done with the bag's main body. You should be able to fold the sides with ease, and you can observe a nice crisscross pattern where the folds are. We will be working on the bag's flap next. Do have with you 10 pieces of 150 cm long yarns. The point where we have the round joining will be the back of the bag. We will work the flap from the back. Locate the center 5 square knots on the second row from the top. Have 2 pieces of yarn poked into the left and right of each of the square knot. Turn the bag upside down and we will make 6 rows of square knots. On the 7th row, make 2 square knots on the left and 2 square knots on the right. On the 8th and 9th row, make 1 square knot on the right and 1 square knot on the left for each row. Before I continue with my 9th row, With the 4 center cords left on the 7th row, pick up the 3rd yarn and do hitch knot towards the left. Do remember to fill in the 1 square knot on the left and on the right on the 9th row. We will pick up the 2nd yarn from the initial row of hitches and will continue to do a row of hitch knots towards the right. After which, on both sides, we will do another row of hitch knots. At the middle portion, make 5 rows of hitch knots. Make 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 knots respectively on each row so that it forms a diamond shape. Pick up the 4th yarn from the left and make a row of hitch knots downwards and towards the right. And vice versa, pick up the 4th yarn from the right and make a row of hitch knots downwards and towards the left. Where the left and right hitch yarns meet, point the left yarn towards the right. And using the yarn on the right, make the last double half hitch knots towards the right hand side. Have a piece of 80 cm yarn ready. Gather all the yarns together and make a tight wing knot. Once you are done, trim and comb the tassel. Lastly, we will be doing up the handle. I have done one side as an example. Each handle will require 4 pieces of 350 cm yarn and 2 pieces of 80 cm yarn for the tying. Locate the second square knot on the third row and have 2 pieces of 350 cm yarn poked into both left and right side of the square knot. Have both ends of the yarns in equal length. Tie up 4 square knots both inside and outside. Get hold of a piece of 80 cm yarn and tie a wing knot. Do remember to have the number of wing knot rounds the same for all the 4 sides of the handle. Continuing on the next step for the handle, holding the stem of the handle between your index and middle finger, spread out 2 cords each to the top, left, right, and bottom. To tie the fat and sturdy handle, you will start with placing the right cord over your bottom cords. Next, have the bottom cords placed over the left cords. And thereafter, the left cords placed over the top cords. The top cords will now be placed through the initial hole which you have created. Pull all the 4 sides of the cords taut. Continue this pattern for 45 times. If you have lost count in how many knots you have done, count in staggering manner from the side. After completing 45 rows of the knot, get ready a piece of 80 cm yarn and we will do the last wing knot for the handle. Divide the yarn into 2 sets of 4. Tie 4 square knots on each set. After completing the knots, have the knots positioned to be placed one on the inside and the other on the outside. Split the yarns into 2 and have them poked into each side of the second last square knot on the third row. From inside the bag, leave out the 2 outer yarns. Make 2 square knots from the yarns in the bag. Finish off with 2 simple ties before snipping off the rest of the yarn. And there we go! We have completed a tote bag with foldable sides. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Great job in completing your macrame project. But after you have completed a macrame project, isn't this a familiar scene to you? We have got many short length yarns. Well, don't throw them away, because you can turn them into beautiful art pieces like such. Join me in some of my videos where I have shown some tutorials on how to create these pieces. Please support me by subscribing to my channel and hitting the bell icon to get notified on my new content. And if you like my videos, please excite me with the like button and also share the video with your friends.